A lot of people really connect to horror because they've actually had real life horrors. This is the way I deal with my real life traumas.
Hello, boils and ghouls. It's your old pal, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Hey, groovy ghoulies, welcome to another episode of Horror Heals. I'm Kendall Austin Stultz, co-host with my partner Corey. Today, we're digging deep into the intersection of horror and healing with a special guest who holds a special place in cult flick history. We have Andre Gower, star of the Monster Squad and the creator of the amazing documentary Wolfman's Got Nards. If you grew up loving the Monster Squad like Corey did, P.S. I was a little old for the Goonies meets Universal Monsters movie, you know just how powerful horror can be in shaping our lives. In today's episode, the first part of 2, Corey chats with Andre about his cinematic journey, his love for horror, and how it ties into healing, before and after his personal health scare.
Andre, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely, yeah. So, knowing that we might connect today, last night Kendall and I rewatched Wolfman's Got Nards.
Oh.
So, kudos for making an awesome horror doc. I think I might like horror documentaries sometimes even more than the horror films themselves. It's just, I don't know why, I'm just kind of like fascinated with them.
I can see that, especially going through the process of actually making one. Yeah, I can see where that happens because you learn, and that comes from kind of a double perspective. One, I think for mine is you learn as the person or part of the team making one, you learn a lot more about the movie itself, about stuff that you didn't know. You learn more about your fan base. You meet more. You learn more constantly, and it's just fascinating. But you're right. I think when you watch something, documentary style or documentary, kind of oriented, it's about learning something, and and then you find a way to relate to what you're learning. So it can be a great experience. Now, if you like the documentary better than the source material, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know if that's the case. Well, I guess it depends on the movie. What's the one that's about the best worst movie or whatever?
Troll 2, yeah.
But no, I mean, Monster Squad, I was at the perfect age when it came out. I was 12. Mm-hmm. So that was like just beginning sort of that gateway to horror. Although I had watched some hardcore horror before that. My dad probably had me watching stuff way too early. My friend Jason had like a satellite dish, so they had like a ton of like VHS recorded stuff. So I mean, I was watching, yikes, the crazy stuff before them. But
I think we all did. But I also think that's also part of this why that generation, which we call X, Generation X. I think that's another component of it. That was just part of it.
Yeah.
We got to watch things that we probably shouldn't have watched, and whether it affected us or gave us bad dreams or not, like we had to work through that.
Exactly.
And now it's so handheld and bubbled and I don't say coddled, but it's coddled. It's almost non-existence of those experiences where you learn how to get through something. But I also think that helps in life in general. But I also think that's what things like movies of any type, but also, especially something like genre movies or horror movies, because horror is a big genre. It's a genre itself has got many different boxes of categories.
Yes.
And, some are scary, some are suspenseful, some are gory and funny and terrifying. But I think that's part of the process is experiencing that, working through that and figuring out how to move on. You're not just stuck in the trauma of watching this one movie. And if you are, then that's a problem. But we went to this stuff. We would go to a Saturday movie and see some terrible schlocky or horrifying, slasher movie, and be devastated. Well, look, it didn't even have to be a horror movie. E.T. is devastating. It's like E.T. is absolutely emotionally annihilating. When E.T.'s in the bottom of the river, it's terrible. And then
you conjured that image immediately. As soon as you said that, like that's the image of the pasty white ET in the creek.
It's horrific, and then he dies, and it's so bad. Of course, he comes back to life, and we celebrate. But we go through this emotional roller coaster, being devastated that ET is dead, and we are traumatized. But then we come out and we learn through, and we got on our bikes and went and played out in the yard the next day.
Right.
We didn't sit at our home and go, "I just saw ET died. I know he came back, but now I'm done for the rest of my life." But I think that's what happens now. I think people have experiences like, "Yeah, I'm done. I can't do anything else." I'm like, no, this is about working through it and battling back.
Absolutely, yeah. Spielberg definitely gave us a 1-2 punch with producing Poltergeist as well, because that also very traumatizing,
very scary.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, and it was PG. I mean, that was prior to PG-13 and stuff. But it's like, whoa. I mean, that movie still is scary.
That's what makes things great.
How do you relate to our theme of this podcast, which is healing through horror, really helping with mental wellness, prior to your health scare and now post health scare?
Well, I think almost in general, I think we kind of touched on it unwittingly, almost over a minute ago when we were talking about this, movies in general and stories. These are experiences of journeys, and movies are really just our new mythology as humans. And what's really funny is I always kind of had some vision. I think it was kind of while we were making the documentary, actually, that I realized that movies are our new mythology, because we had books and literature, and then now we made a lot of our modern movies off of, older books and literature, and then older mythologies in itself. But there's something about this communal experience of sitting in the dark with a group of people and, going through this experience of this story. And when you think about it, that's what humans have been doing for millennia. They sit around in the dark around a blinking light, which is a fire, and tell their myths and tell their stories and tell their history. And that's how everybody learned everything. And that's how everybody connected with their tribe or their village or their community. And that's all movie theaters are. Movie theaters, we sit in the dark, we look at a flickering light in a communal experience and go through this story. And I sat around and was like, "Oh shit, this is the same thing."
Right.
This is what the power of like going to the movies can do. It's not the same thing as sitting at home and watching. It's not, unless you have 75 other people that you don't know or related to and sharing the shared experience. And that's what really, when you write movies and when you act in movies, you read the words on the page. This is supposed to be connecting to people as a group, and they're experiencing this all at the same moment, whether it's a rah-rah moment or it's the, oh my God, it's E.T. in the bottom of the creek. Everybody's going to have this collective and a collective tear or a collective rah-rah moment. That's what it's about. We don't have that a lot anymore. But anyway, I digress. That was kind of the overall type of thing. But with the theme of, healing through, it can be healing through art, in general. But if you boil it down to healing through horror, we can break it down. We can get really granular if you like. You got the guy that's going to go on a bunch of tangents. But I think, and like I said, there's a lot of things that we learn by kind of making something like Wolfman's Got Nards. Is what are horror movies? What are our monster stories? And our monster stories, and all of these classic monsters, be it Dracula or Wolfman or the Mummy coming to life, these are all ancient stories. These are all kind of mythologies that got put in text in modern times, and then we put on the screen. But all of these monsters are usually conceived or written or celebrated during different times, and there's all kind of what's going on in society or culture at the time. And they are actually physical manifestations of our fears and of our bad thoughts. So that's what our monster movies are. And that's what monster books used to be, and that's what, comics are, and that's what stories are. So we get to, as a collective, as a society, as a culture, we get to watch these things. And look, we're very pinholed with our perspective growing up in the U.S. because we see our movies, but we also get to see some others, which are great. And now we get to see more international stuff. But, every region or every country has their myths and their monsters and they make movies about them. They really do. And, we just get lucky with technology being, of our generations, that we get to see some of this stuff. And we get to share in those old stories and those monsters and what they are. It's the fears of the society manifesting in these stories and in these creatures and these monsters. But when we watch something like that, whether it's a creature feature or a monster that's the bad guy, or it's a thriller, or it's ghosts or whatever, we are tapping in something into an archetype in ourselves, and almost everything's archetypal. And that's why kind of Monster Squad actually kind of works when you think about it, because all the themes and the characters, they're just archetypes of, really, like Carl Jung would have been a big fan of Monster Squad. He'd be like, see, I told you. And he goes, oh, I see you read my books. Because you're going to connect with these kind of authority figures. You're going to connect with the fear figures. You're going to connect with the heroes. You're going to connect with the bad people. And then kind of have it's a hero's journey, things like that. It's really all Star Wars is also. It's the same stuff, right? With horror, I think it almost breaks down. That's kind of the overall umbrella. But it even breaks down kind of in, departments or compartments, because we have different types of horror movies, and we like to be scared because that's controlled. No one wants to be in fear for their life or someone else's life. No one likes to, as they're going through the day, get jumped at and be like, oh, there's a boogeyman around the corner, or what's that, but every time we go to bed, we feel around with our feet. And it's like, oh, is there anything down there? We're like, oh my God, is there something under my bed? Because that's always in here. But when we go to get scared, that's why we go to roller coasters, because it's a controlled fear of like, okay, this is that feeling of danger,
right?
But I'm not going to get hurt. Hopefully, like we get hurt on roller coasters, but you're not supposed to get hurt. It's like you don't go on a trip from LA to Florida in the airplane and go, boy, I hope we do this a bunch,
right?
But this is what you're always thinking, and that's what I think horror movies are. Is we go because it's an exposure to fear and danger that we can still experience, but we're going to be okay. So it's really the most human thing is I'm on my cake and eat it too.
Right. And I think you hit upon something important in that going to the theater and actually sitting there with a bunch of people watching it, you're not in it alone. You're all together. And
that's why it's a shared experience. And you don't go on a roller coaster alone either.
Right.
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 If you don't, it's like probably not a profitable roller coaster, but it's like, oh, here's your pod. Great. You wait into it for one guy, but because it's the screams, it's the ups and downs. It's the same thing in movies. Every roller coaster has a story. Every movie has a story, and the movie is a roller coaster. So it's great comparisons. And you're right. It is that shared experience. Now, you can also sit at home and experience it on your own. It's like reading a book. You don't have to read a book in a group. You don't have to do that. But either way is okay. But I think that's where it really, really hits, is the shared experience of this controlled exposure to fear that helps you get through that moment. And it can make you stronger, either physically or mentally, or both. But then a lot of people really connect to horror because they've actually had real life horrors.
Yeah.
And then they can go and they go, this is the way I deal with my real life traumas. I mean, trauma is now like everybody's new, everything and everybody's new word, because it's a real thing. And before, we used to just kind of get over it. But then do you ever get over it? Do you just get through it or get by it? And there's different levels of traumatic experiences, of course. And there's physical trauma, there's emotional trauma, there's family trauma. There's a new thing that I learned. There's financial trauma. There's, people that grow up in certain situations and it affects them in their adult life. And, it's just different things. So I'm not being flippant by mentioning all these things and kind of brushing up. These are all actual things that we understand a little bit more about nowadays. And I personally have actually learned more about it. But also what's interesting with, let's take horror movies, and since we kind of talked generationally a little bit, I think the approach to it has also now changed, unfortunately, because now it's, oh, this is a movie that has these themes, and you're like, we have trigger warnings, which I don't think are necessarily bad things, but isn't that the point of the scary movie? Right. If you tell me I'm going to be scared, and so like, okay, this movie, this has explosions. You can get all the lists of the things that might trigger somebody, right. And it's become about the individual, not that shared communal experience that we all get through together. Now it's about the individual. Before, it was about the shared experience, and you come out of the theater and go, oh my God, I was so scared when he jumped out of the closet. Or when like the car was flipping over and then like everybody's guts were flying out. That was gross. And then you're like, yeah, I know that got me, but the part that got me. But then if we talk about the generational thing again, and I'm trying not to have a big a problem with it as I think I do. So I'm trying to kind of analyze myself on this a little bit. You know, we now see what's going on in, you know, our schools and in, you know, in the, does anybody go to the mall? There are no more malls. You know, in the playgrounds. Oh yeah, there's no more playgrounds because they're dangerous. Whether because there's weird people walking around them and, you know, hurting your kid, or they're just going to bump their head on a bar. Like, oh, we can't have these things. Everybody will get hurt. One of the differences, and I'm saying one's better than the other, but there are differences of generations, is we went out, saw the movie, and then went home and played out in the park or out in the woods or rode our bikes in the neighborhood. And we talked about the scary movie. We may have been traumatized when we went home at night and got in the covers or like, oh shit, I can't go to sleep yet. But then you worked that out and you got through it and you moved on. And then when we were at the mall or at the playground and we see a group of kids that aren't our best friends, that maybe not like you, or you see the bullies, you know, we see this in a lot of movies, a la Monster Squad. These were all and we grew, I mean, kind of similar age, you know, this group of people, kids, grew up in an era where our adults and our parents and our uncles and our teachers was like, hey, words are just words. They cannot hurt you, because we had sticks and stones.
Right. We
had a jingle in our brain. If you think you know your jingles, like Safe Flight Repair, Safe Flight Replace, or, you know, the I'm loving it from McDonald's, the jingles work. We had the jingle that we grew up with that was sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you. That was a really powerful thing, because, yeah, sticks and stones can actually break your bone, but words are nothing. And now we don't even care about sticks, and words are the most damaging thing that we have, because everybody's affected by something that is just a wavelength of sound in the air that means nothing. And words on social media and everything are killing kids every day. And that didn't happen before. And I think we flipped it around, because now we can't even go enjoy something like a horror movie or something. Oh, my kid's not going to go see this, or you shouldn't go see this because it's scary. Like, yeah, it's a horror movie. I'm supposed to be terrified going to see this. Because if you watch it, I don't think as many young kids watch horror movies as older adults are still watching the horror movies. And I think it's different generations. I don't think, because kids are so kind of kept away or shielded, and look, you should protect your kids. Absolutely. I also see people not doing the basics of protecting. They're not even paying attention when they're out walking across the street. But they're like, oh, you can't go see this movie because it's got bad words in it. But then you're not going to pay attention when you're walking across the street with your kid. Okay, parent, you're doing a great job. But I don't think everybody's learning the same things and coming out of it the same way. And I think that's when we have to find out what we deal with. So only speaking of, I don't know what the kids are doing today, because I don't watch as much YouTube as they do. But, you know, I think horror is a catharsis, and it's healthy. It's not damaging. And I think the image of it now, it's like, oh, it's damaging. Like, it's really bad. I was like, is a horror movie where a guy with, like, knives for fingers is, you know, who's in your dreams, which, by the way, I take Freddy is probably the scariest monster because he's not real. He's in your dreams. And you go to sleep. That's just terrifying. Jason Voorhees, not a problem. All I have to do is not trip, and I can walk at a slow pace and get away from him. But Freddy, like, you can't get away from him, so he's terrifying. But like, oh, we can't, you know, you can't watch this movie because it might make you sad or scared. I'm like, that's what you need, because then you learn what real sad is, what real scared is. And then when you go out into the world, you can figure out how to adjust and how to go through these experiences that you will in your life. And now everything is just a horror movie to everybody. Everything's a traumatic experience. And I was like, let me tell you something. It's not. I don't have a degree in it. I'm no physician. I'm no psychologist. I'm no researcher. I'm just an observer. But I do know that not everything that happens to you is bad or trauma. You're making that about yourself, because you can always equate it to someone else who actually has some issue or a trauma, and you're being a completely, you know, uneducated, you know, person about just making it about yourself. Because I think it's more about the individual now instead of a collective or communal experience, especially with movies. And so I think I've kind of circled, tangent out, and came back and kind of tied some things together if it made any sense. But that's what happens. I kind of ramble a little bit, but it ends up in the back where we started.
Good. Well, you raised an interesting point in that as an adult, when I started going to the horror conventions and I was seeing parents bring, like, you know, 3-4-year-olds dressed like Chucky or, you know, Billy the Puppet from Saw, I was like, well, this is a little, is this appropriate? But like, these kids are well-rounded. Like, they're getting introduced to stuff at an early age that, and I think that's going to better prepare them for life.
No doubt. I mean, that really is true. And then, kind of when you're shielding them from everything, you're protecting them from nothing. And it's like, I just coined that. So it's copyrighted Andre Gower, but you can use it for $5, let's say. I like that, when you're shielding them from everything, you're protecting them from nothing. But I think you're right. Like, especially now, granted, if you're going to a horror convention, you see like this cool couple and they're probably all tatted up and like have like a cool hat on and they're awesome. And they've got this cute little kid walking around in a Chucky outfit. Did the kid choose the Chucky outfit or did the parents? Because they're a Chucky fan. We know where it kind of starts. However, being someone, this is somewhere I will say I have an advanced degree on, is interacting with those people and learning from them and meeting thousands of them a year. That those kids are now watching in genre space. They are watching the new stuff and the old stuff, especially the old stuff because the parents are introducing them at a much younger age. At a much younger age. And I don't think it's damaging for one of two reasons. One is because it is coming from those sources. I'd rather have that really cool kind of tatted up, kind of cool hat parents with their Chucky kid showing them horror movies because it's in a controlled environment and they're understanding it than that same kid going on social media and finding out their own horrors. No doubt. If I had to pick one or the other, it's that kid in the Chucky outfit all day long. Because there are much more horrific things out there on YouTube and in the internet than there is on a VHS tape or streaming.
Right. Literally having this conversation with Kendall yesterday because we were talking about our dads and I still have a complicated relationship with my dad. He's been gone for a long time, but he introduced me to Monty Python, Saturday Night Live, Beverly Hills, all this stuff. Like, and I was, too young to get it all.
Right.
And horror stuff, Friday the 13th, but it's like, okay, all right. Well, he trusted me enough to know that, like, you can handle this. You might not get every single joke, but this is something that I appreciate and I think you're going to appreciate down the line. And it's like, and it sticks with me, And
it does. And, sorry about your dad. My, what is it? 20, it's been 10 years, just past 10 years when my dad, died. But, my dad wasn't a horror fan. My dad wasn't, he liked some funny stuff. My dad, he liked sci-fi and he liked Cold War movies and World War II because my dad was a little bit older. My parents were a little bit older than most of my friends' parents. They're like same age, like they're just a little bit older. So it's the same thing. You learn from those things that you get exposed to, and you find that you inherently have some interest in those things because they're the things that first kind of pique kind of your interest of learning more about something, or you recognize something and this was historical. Like when you're 7 watching, an Audie Murphy World War II movie, you have no idea what's going on. You don't even know what World War II is. Now what's funny is, when I was 7 in 1980, World War II was 35 years before that. That's like, literally World War II when I was 7 was in the 90s. I don't think people really get that. They don't really get that because most people that are under, let's say, 35 now or under 40 have never had a gigantic event globally happen to them except for September 11th and now COVID. But neither one of those was as devastating as the Vietnam War, the Korean War, or World War II, and no one has any context. And it's hard. And we didn't even know that. We didn't even understand. We weren't involved in any of that. We just saw the aftermath and the art, which was kind of horrors itself. The other thing is I don't think, except for those cool parents that are showing their kid, Chucky movies, that a lot of parents are as involved in that. They're just saying no. Or they're going, that's not safe, and I got to, because I'm too busy doing other stuff. Here's your iPad. Watch YouTube. You're not going to watch a Freddy movie because that's too scary. But here's your iPad. Whoa, wait a minute. It's like I'm not even an internet sleuth, and I can find some stuff on the internet that I shouldn't be watching as a 51-year-old. And that's the problem. It's just interesting. But so we've got to find some way to kind of get back that. My biggest thing is we've got to find some way to get back to the sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you, because we're just way off in this world where, yeah, you shouldn't say mean shit to anybody. You're the mean person. But not everything that everybody says is mean. It's how you're taking it. And we grew up with, like, you can't take any of that at all. You can't take anything in that, because these are just words. You have to go figure out for yourself, meet the right people, and learn what you're learning. Now everything is just bad. You're like, look, 100% of everything can't be like this. It's insane, and we're literally flying off the rails here. But maybe something like horror movies brings us back a little bit.
Well, and horror culture. I mean, I encourage everybody to go to a horror convention, whether you are big into horror or not, because you're going to be exposed to some of the most genuine, welcoming, fantastic people that you've ever met. I brought a colleague to a con a couple of years ago, and she is not a horror fan at all. It's too scary for her, but like, she went to a horror con and she got it. The light bulb went off. Like, oh, okay, now I get the appeal.
Right.
So I want to take you back. Can you remember your first con as a guest and what that experience was like for you?
I do. I know exactly what it was. It was Monster Mania in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, a Dave Hagen show. It was the first invite. It was right after, I don't know, the next year, no, 6 months or so after we did the first Monster Squad's, kind of cast reunion screening at the Alamo Drafthouse in Austin, Texas. And then we got invited to a con, and we're like, wait, we're getting invited to a convention? Like, these horror conventions, that's neat. And I was like, well, this would be cool. Like, this is probably our only invite ever. And, we didn't know what we were doing. We knew it was like, we had to have pictures, and we signed them, and people bought them, and we took photos. And it was actually a pretty good, that's a big show. I didn't know anything about it. And we went there, and I think because we weren't really still sure about this Monster Squad thing. The resurgence hadn't really kind of kicked off yet. And Monster Mania kind of helped start that. I went there, I was like, wait, there's people dressed up. Okay, I understand. I think probably the better story of understanding it is not mine. It's probably Duncan Regeer's, because Duncan was there. And Duncan is just an amazing person. And, it's tall, still looks amazing. It's just, I describe Duncan Regeer as, the only word is regal. He just steps out and it's like, I'm a regal guy. I'm regal. And he's got this voice and this demeanor, and there's just this build. And he's an artist. And he paints and does watercolors. He also has his own wine label. And I'm like, well, of course you do. You're Dracula. He was there, and it was like, 2.5 day show. Like the first day we were there, we're all sitting there signing our photos and taking things. And he's over there, and he's got his poster, and he's selling his art and his wine. And no one's going to his table. Oh, this isn't a flea market. This isn't an art show. He goes, these people are here for Dracula. And so he switched around and took all the time, and then everybody went to go see Duncan Regeer. It's a learning thing to understand what the people go for and why they go. It's not what they go for, it's why they go for it. Because that is that genre fan or that horror fan, that's their communal experience. And that's the definition of a convention. A convention is a convening of like-minded people for a certain goal, right? It's about getting together. Now we just think conventions is like, I think we Walmarted the word, but if you break down the, etymology of it, that's what it is. It's a convening of people of a like goal. And you're right. I don't think any fan base out there, there's anime boggles my mind. The fan base, it's unbelievable. It's fascinating. The sci-fi world, sports fans, they're all awesome because they're all very, very into their thing. They are all not teammates. When you go to a horror convention or a horror event with genre fans, and they are all on the same team. They may like a movie or a thing or a character, but they are all on the same team. And if you went to a sci-fi convention and you had like Star Wars fans and like Star Trek fans, they would go outside and fight in the parking lot. But if you went to a horror convention and you saw like Monster Squad fans and Goonies fans, or whatever it is, Freddy fans and Jason Voorhees fans, they may be like, "Oh, my guy's better than your guy." But if the sci-fi kids were outside, they all get together and go fight them because they are all on the same team. It doesn't matter. You're like, "Oh, I hate Freddy." It's like, "Well, I hate Jason." Well, there's some Star Trek guys outside that we're all going to go kick their ass, and they would absolutely do that. And I think that's what's different because they connect through these films and these stories. But it's because of how we opened up with what these characters, these monsters, these horrors, and these scary situations do to the human mind. Is it creates this unnerving, scary experience that you make it through, and then you've made it through together, and you're stronger and better for it, and then you can laugh about it. This is in no way equal comparison. But people, they connect, they create bonds, and they create friendships. And it's the same thing that it's not the same thing, but it's the same kind of wiring of the brain when people go through shared actual traumatic or disaster experiences, or a combat setting, or a war footing, or something like a war experience. It's a shared experience, and your brain actually changes, and you're connected, and it's really the people that you really, really, really are tethered to. And I think on some level, kind of the genre community is like that, because there's soap opera fans out there, fervent fan base. And you go to a soap opera convention, soaps aren't very traumatic. Soaps aren't very scary. So, I mean, they can be. If you want, I've been on them. They can be scary. But it's really not the same thing. Like, people come through it and they really connect with something. And I don't care what you connect with, whether it's Bold and the Beautiful and Young and the Restless, or Sailor Moon, or Robotech, or The Ring, or Monster Squad, or Friday the 13th. I don't care. If you're connecting with something, that means your mind and your brain, which are not the same thing, your neurological functions and your emotional functions are all working together and creating some sort of, something to experience and enjoy. Be scared, or be funny, or be happy, and then you're connecting with other people. And that's the only way we can actually make it through this world, is by connecting with other people. We can't do it on our own in the dark with the door locked. It's not going to happen. And unfortunately, I think we see too much of that now. And I'm not talking about my introverted friends. I had to learn I had to learn introverts. And I did. That's a whole other thing. We get it. You still like to go out, but you need prep time and you need to recharge. And a lot of horror fans are introverts. And they gear up, they prep, and they go, and then they need 48 to 72 hours to recharge before they do anything else. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that just don't go out and connect with other human beings. If you go back in the anthropological record, the early humans that went off on their own, they didn't make it. They just didn't make it. And it's about your tribe, and it's about your village, and it's about learning from, and because everything comes from learning down. But now we have access to so much information, which is amazing, and no one's learning anything. We have instant access to all possible knowledge, and we are the dumbest we've ever been as humans.
I know, it's sad. Again, something else that Kendall and I were talking about yesterday, because I've been trying to teach him some, digital marketing stuff to help with the podcast, and I'm like, you can't stop learning. You can't stop adding new skills. You can't stop improving, what you're already good at, because
the other thing is true, because you'll get left behind because someone else is learning it and you're not, and you're toast. And I've had that. I've gone through that more than once. When we circle back to, kind of that, all those big thinking things, I think that's what emotionally and mentally horror movies think. People think horror movies are damaging. It's like, no, they're not, because we know they're entertainment. We're being scared on purpose. It's intentionally being scared with, and then that's usually followed with a joke, or some pastiche of cliche stuff all over the place. Like, there's a running car with a full tank of gas and 2 shotguns in the pickup truck pointing in the right direction, but you're going to run in the scary dark barn. Like, we know that, and we're set up, and we dive into it every single time. That's on purpose, and we know that. And those are good things, because like I said, mentally and emotionally, we're entering in that to get through it and celebrate at the end, because that's why we have a thing called the final girl. We're celebrating the survivor. Like, we make fun of the kills because we're not getting killed and we're not killing anybody. We can do that because we're probably, messed up a little bit, in the human. We shouldn't really be making these movies, but we've realized unintentionally that these are actually emotionally healthy, probably, and cathartic, definitely.
And that wraps up part 1 with Andre Gower. Such incredible insights into the way horror helps us navigate real-life fears and trauma, and how the horror community has created a space for healing and growth. Stay tuned for part 2 in just 2 days. where we cut even deeper into Andre's experiences from the Monster Squad Renaissance to horror conventions and those awesome fans. Take a stab at subscribing and leaving us a review. We want to hear and share your own horror healing stories on the podcast. Email us at horrorhealspodcast@gmail.com and check out horrorheals.com for blog posts, cool artwork, and more. And remember, when someone questions, horror is good for our mental health, you can tell them, of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.